I would like to invite James Feger, who is the General Manager, Service Provider, Global Service Provider Business Unit with F5 Networks. James, I know it's late in the evening for you. Hope you had your dinner. Welcome. Great to see you again. Great to partner with F5 again. So you heard all the CEOs, James. They believe there is enough growth left just in the core connectivity itself, and they will continue to build on the adjacencies as well. So hopefully you can take this conversation and challenge our CTOs, reduce cost to serve, deliver on innovation, and that set the stage for the innovation panel. So over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Manoj, and I agree. I think there's a lot left, and when we talk about the context of where I think innovation's going and where we see our customers going, we think about this in kind of the sphere around 5G, telco edge, and really next generation services for our customers. And I think that's what I'm really excited to take on, and I think we have a pretty esteemed panel joining us here. We have Thomas Hundt, who is the Group Chief Strategy and Technology Officer of Axiata, and also we have hi Thomas, and we also have Jan Horn, Next Generation Technology Advisor for Smart Incorporated, and also an Independent Director of Banglalink and Beeline. So thank you both. Thank you both for taking the time to be part of this session. I'm actually pretty excited about this. I've had a chance to kind of do these sessions before, actually from your side of the table. I spent quite a bit of time over on the I'd say on the carrier side, and so I promise this is my first time moderating actually. So I promise fair but thought-provoking questions for both of you. So with that, I think we'll just dive right in for sake of time, because I hope that we get some energy with some of these answers. Or definitely some insight. So this is to both of you. I'll let you pick who goes first, but the easy one is where are you currently in your journey of network transformation? And I think all topics are on the table here. RAN, Open RAN, public cloud, where the public cloud providers are in terms of your relationships, partnerships, and also edge. What are your thoughts in general on edge services for both of you? So who would like to start?
Joachim, please go ahead.
Okay, nice to see you, Thomas. Interestingly, James, you picked two Germans living since many years in Southeast Asia. I don't know if it has any importance for this, but yeah, thank you. I'm working in the Philippines. I'm in this largest telco here, Smart and PLDT. They're pretty old and incumbent. And the innovation or the transformation process started already a few years ago. And it was necessary because before you can introduce new, shiny services, you had to do some fundamentals. And some of the fundamentals, just name some of them, was a complete re-architecture of the transport network. Very often underestimated, could be a bottleneck for all kinds of services. So we moved to all fiber, of course, very scalable, software-defined networking platform with very high resiliency, and the architecture we chose, we call congestion-free. So to be able to really run whatever service you need. The second was, its same importance is to also move virtual on the core network. Packet core, circuit switch core, HLR, VLR, all of these things need to be done. Again, it's a prerequisite for 5G, for example. You can't do network slicing with these type of things. We also introduced a new hardware-software stack, which we call NFVI. It's a common hardware software for all types of services, whether it's a prepaid platform, core network, or whatever, which generates a lot of synergies and makes you more flexible and cost-effective when deploying services. And all of that you need to kind of bind together with an orchestration. And all of these things have been completed here in the Philippines. And we set ourselves a target, actually, that was in 2016, to achieve nationwide coverage in LTE, and also to be able to launch 5G in the Philippines by 2020. And today, 2022, we have 96.5% LTE coverage and about 50%, 50% in 5G. So quite well advanced, and we are actually quite happy about it. So that's the fundamentals. The second is when you talk about edge. Edge for me is a necessity. The simple reason for that is customer experience. Because as the technologies, LTE and even more 5G goes down in latency, the physical distance to the content plays more and more a role. So if 100 kilometer is about 1 millisecond latency, in 5G we have below 10. So you don't want to have 1,000 kilometer away data center where you have the content. So we have started to deploy edge data centers. Now, question is, what is edge? But we start small, but over time we will deploy more as the services grow. We also started to deploy first services in the public cloud. This is quite an adventure if you live on an island like the Philippines, because not all hyperscalers are here. So there's a question of resilience and again latency. But we just launched our OTT video platform 2 weeks ago together with a company called First Light Media. It's completely public cloud, and we are very happy so far. I have to say, for a first kind of application, this encourages us to look at the next step. And one of the debates we have is at least to try the 5G as a core in the public cloud. O-RAN, a bit more skeptical. Not that I do not like the technology, it's great. But the question of the business case is not as easy answered as many of the suppliers say it's 40% cheaper. Yes, for some components. But if you look to the total cost of ownership, there's a lot of complexity you have to look at. We will trial it, and I think sooner or later we will also deploy it, because there are a lot of advantages also with that technology, but it's not as simple, just put it there, right? But most important in the transformation, what we did was not technology. It was a change of mindset, moving our teams from a network KPI focus to a service focus, meaning looking at what are customers actually doing with that network. They are not doing 5G or LTE. They're using YouTube, they're using whatever, TikTok and this kind of stuff, right? So we had to establish a service organization, we call it Service Operations Center, which looks at all the services customers do. We crowdsource the experience. We look at it every day, and we benchmark ourselves every week against competition with the ambition really to be the best network in the Philippines, not only on average speed, but really down to the detailed location. And glad to state we have achieved that actually, but the focus is very necessary. So my conclusion of that is that the new technology always has to yield to a better customer experience. Otherwise, it's useless.
Absolutely. Thank you. I have some thoughts, but I'll wait until Thomas goes.
Well, nice opening. Can touch base on a few of the topics which Joachim mentioned. The question of fundamentals, right? At the end, we as telcos, we are in a very tough spot. Consumers want more data, they want better experience, but they want to hardly pay for it. And our investment cycles are getting shorter and shorter. So how to break that vicious cycle at the end, right? And at the end, we are commoditized. We don't like it. We can do whatever we want to get out from that commoditization concept or pressure, but ultimately we are. And we are heavily regulated as businesses, right? Which many others riding on top of us are not. So all these issues in a way are triggering fundamental changes and fundamental solutions are required to get to a sustainable state. And Axiata with its 6 opcos, besides the infrastructure business and the digital verticals which we are operating. But looking at the 6 telcos we have in Indonesia, in Malaysia, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, we are all having the same fundamental problem. Yields curve is looking disastrous in a way. Yields are coming down. Every year we have to literally pump in 30-40% more traffic just to maintain the revenues. And at the same time, technology is evolving fast. Consumers' expectations are going up. So how to break out of this? So we have at Axiata started to rethink how we operate. In the past, it has been That's a bit of an Axiata, let's say, historical setup. We have been relatively loose amongst each other. Every opco has been operating rather independently, carries its own brand, identity, products, etc. But we can't afford anymore on the technology side to operate all totally independently. We need to yield much greater synergies, and we have established a concept called collective brain, where yes, the center is relatively lean, but the opcos and the best brains of the opcos work virtually together to solve the common problem. And the common problem, to start with, before we talk about innovations and let's say the future, is how to bring cost to serve down, how to, at the end of the day, create a bit factory which is operating at a level where cost per bit is coming down faster than, in a way, the yield. So plenty of measures, obviously, to be looked at, and Open RAN is one of the things which we are looking at, and we have deployed commercially Open RAN in Sri Lanka and Malaysia, small scale as we speak. And what Joachim mentioned, I mean, the business case is the challenging question here, and we are now looking at what is next for us in ORAN, and the acid test is on. And yes, indeed, it's not yet convincing. We are looking at different scenarios. We started at the beginning with a scenario: is it great for rural coverage? But ultimately, it doesn't look like the costs are not that much lower, and the complexity is high. So that use case we are parking aside at the moment. But we see some opportunities from an overlay standpoint when it comes to, let's say, new bands being deployed, either, let's say, 2.6, 2.3 gigahertz or C-band. When it comes to a pure overlay with a lot of bandwidth in play, then eventually such an ORAN setup is giving a business case. But it's not a quick win. It's not an let's just do ORAN and you save 30-40%. Absolutely not. I mean, the legacy vendors are not standing still either. And as that complexity of ORAN, the whole orchestration, automation, the people you require to operate ORAN is adding on. So from a TCO standpoint, it is, as we speak, not yet giving a leapfrog. We hope for it, but it's not there yet. Certainly, when looking at network transformations, I mean, Joachim mentioned about NFVI. I mean, certainly that is the baseline for everything on the core side. And in all our opcos, we have gone fully NFVI. But actually, we decided now to stop further NFVI investments, at least into new stacks, because we are looking really at cloud native as the way to go. So stopping NFVI investments in a way, going towards cloud native, that is the short-term, medium-term direction we have embarked on. We are very aggressively shutting down now 3G in the first markets, Malaysia, Cambodia. 3G is being shut down literally as we speak. The question, yes, 2G shut down first versus 3G shut down first, was not really a question to us. 2G has to stay on in the markets we're operating at. The handset ecosystem in 2G is simply too wide to abandon. But 3G is highly inefficient, as we all know. It's a hybrid. It's okay-ish for voice. It's okay-ish for data, but it's not great in either. That's why 3G is going fast, which triggers the challenge to scale voice over LTE. Which we have embarked on in different timings in our markets, with great success in some markets, with big challenges in others. So scaling voice over LTE is really a long run. Voice over 5G then coming next, but that's where we're heading to. We have set ourselves a short-term, medium-term goal of 10 cents a gigabyte costs, production costs, and how to achieve that. Yes, very aggressively moving towards data networks, so it means 4G, 5G. In a way, we see it in most of our markets as a key tool to bring down cost to serve, while obviously looking at incremental revenues from a B2B standpoint and EMBB, etc. But how to eliminate congestions in the 4G networks, how to bring down the cost to serve. That is where 5G comes to play. Offload 4G, move the traffic into 5G. I mean, unfortunately, that is still a vision because in none of our markets we were successfully able to launch 5G yet. Regulators are not yet giving us the spectrum in the magnitude we need to do, but in 2022, expecting to launch 5G at least in some of our markets. And that's seen as a very fundamental step towards lowering production costs, actually, and then enabling innovations. Joachim mentioned transport. Indeed, transport actually is a bit of the stepchild when looking typically and discussing typically our network evolutions. But actually, it is paramount important. No congestion, absolutely, right? I mean, you can have the best radio network, but if you're not transforming your transport network, your whole experience is gone. One single bottleneck in the network can spoil the whole experience. And going there into kind of SDN transformation is absolutely important. We have advanced very well on it, but it's a long journey, right? I mean, we are all having legacy equipment which needs to be transformed. Mentioned investment cycles are getting shorter and shorter. We have to look at our balance sheets, etc. But it's a long journey, and all of this then augmented with advanced automation, touchless operation, aiming for obviously automated network completely, level 3 as the first major milestone we are aiming at. So in a way, yes, enabling new services, but fixing the fundamental first, namely maintaining profitability through production cost decrease.
Thank you. I think I heard a couple of things in there that made me smile because it brings back memories actually, and you both touched on a couple of things there. So Jan, you mentioned you're skeptical of O-RAN. I think Thomas, you said a similar thing, and it reminds me of when SDN and NFV both, remember, they both kind of came out at the same time. There was a lot of media attention around how SDN and NFV were going to completely transform the entire industry. And the reality is that we as carriers had a difficult time implementing it because it was new, it was complex, the integration into our existing systems didn't exist, and what we're finding now is here we are 10 years later, and the technologies actually are helping us, but the time to adoption and the time to scale to where they actually were providing real benefit versus problems, it took a while, and I believe that the concepts of O-RAN and the use cases that we believe will start coming with all this new power that 5G brings. There's the hype, and then there's the time to reality, and I think our opportunity is to take advantage of the technology, but also kind of manage the time to reality. And Thomas, you said, you have a NFVI deployments going on, but you're starting to slow those down to transition over to cloud native. I think we see that, frankly, with our customer base that I get to interact with at F5, we see a lot of that, and I actually question if that's a learning lesson from jumping so fast into NFV before it was really ready. So just an observation from my perspective.
Yeah, but if I may comment on that, there's another great example for that. This is the technology called NFC. I don't know if you remember, mid of the 2000s, everybody said, if you are not in NFC, you will be dead tomorrow. Today, all of our smartphones have NFC inside, and who is using it, right? And it is basically proof that the technology itself doesn't make any difference as long as you don't know what to do with it and what you want to achieve from a customer perspective, business perspective, bottom line perspective. So, for example, these new technologies like NFVI or network function virtualization in general, as a standalone business case, make no sense whatsoever. The way we try to do it is to put it into the investment cycle.
Yeah.
So if you have, a certain platform, it's typically 8 years on your balance sheet. And if you come into the replacement moment, you have to invest anyway. And that's the perfect time where you look into what are the most suitable technologies, not at that point in time only, but for the next 8 years, because whatever you buy will be again for 8 years on your balance sheet. So your decisions need to be done in the time where it makes the most sense, because otherwise you just drown money into hardware, software, which at the end of the day will not pay back.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
please.
just add. I mean, indeed, some of the technologies have been overhyped at the beginning, and then you come into this reality mode, right? Where you look at it with a second pair of eye, and you see the reality is not all as good as it was looked like at the beginning. And indeed, investment cycles is very critical to look at. Unfortunately, investment cycles are also for us as telcos externally in a way dominated, right? Whenever a country is ready to enter the 5G era, for example, then it's where we are starting the investment cycles. And business cases for, let's say, technology standalone, they might indeed not fly if you look at them on a standalone basis. But if you look at it from what is your bigger objective, and I said in our markets, operational efficiency and production cost optimization is very fundamental to sustain. If that's the objective, as enabler then for future innovations and future revenue growth, then we are in a way pressurized to adapt those technologies, which are giving advantages on the cost sides.
Yeah, well, and that leads into the next question, and I think frankly we have addressed it, but I want it to be specifically kind of restated. Is what do you see as the primary driver for the transformation? Is it cost, or is it revenue? I assume the answer is probably a bit of both, but what do you see as the more predominant driver when you're building your cases?
Actually, I would call it, an old colleague of mine in Tele2, Niklas Sonkin, he called it the crocodile principle. Crocodile, revenues up, cost down. You cannot look at it alone, because if you just save cost and your revenues don't get not impact or even go down, you have won nothing, right?
Yeah.
So it's about competitiveness. It's about being accretive. The investment needs to be accretive to the business value, right? It needs to be attractive to competition. You have to be better than competition, attractive to customer, better than competition, and so on. So the first is really to be competitive, and then you have to produce it at lower cost. Only then it makes sense. The second is what I said before. You have to have a medium long-term view, because otherwise you churn through investments and you zigzag. It's also not efficient, But at the end of the day, if you do not innovate in time, you may actually get stuck in legacy, as Thomas said before, or you pay double because you have to catch up.
And to me, priority indeed. You can't say one over the other. To us, operational efficiency and the cost side of things, considering that most of our markets are prepaid heavy, mobile broadband heavy, is fundamental to enable growth, actually, because we can't serve customer expectations and the ever-growing data traffic if you're not producing efficiently. And that efficiency then enables us to innovate, to build platforms, to build our B2B2X play, to build in the open marketplaces, to connect and the various players of the ecosystem and to generate incremental revenues. But also simply to serve, yes, as said, the MBB drive, which we are so much under pressure on, right? So it's one serves the other in a way, in my perspective.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's again going back. I believe going back to when SDN and NFVI were coming along. There were camps and say no, it's a cost reduction, or it's all this new business because we can serve it up virtually. And I think the reality is that we've recognized it. They're coupled together. And just because the technology is different doesn't necessarily mean that the way you you look at a business case to develop infrastructure and create services for customers changes. It's just new mechanisms to achieve your goals. So I think that makes sense. From a build out perspective, though, with this transformation, we see a lot of in your organizations as well, like bringing together the kind of the technology infrastructure teams and the technology IT teams, the systems developers and the network operators. How are you building your teams? How are you building your capabilities to support this? Are you trying to bring in more new talents that didn't necessarily exist in terms of skill sets from prior networking days? Are you partnering more with other organizations? What are some of your objectives in this space with your talent and how you're building your teams?
If I start, I think it's very critical to understand that there is a lot of change going on. The technology doesn't care about organization, right? The new innovations which come in go across IT network. The lines have blurred since long, and there is no value in keeping it as it is, right? So the way we approach it, that all the big projects we have started in the last couple of years, we have always started as a transformation program rather than a technology replacement program. And that means from day one, we look at not only the technology change or the business impact, we also look at processes, we look at skills development, we look at roles, new roles, old roles disappearing, and then eventually also impact on the organization. So that whenever the technology or the project is more or less ready, we have reasonably prepared the organization for it. That's typically part of the contract with the vendor also, right? So that they help us with their experience in other markets in order to really progress our company sufficiently. And when it comes to outsourcing, insourcing, we were creating new balances. Things which have been core competence in the past, like best reference is our towers, which we just sold, for example, to a.co, which is owned by Axiata. That was a core competence in the past. Now it's not our core competence anymore. So tower companies can much better take care of it. So I can free up resources on one side. I can, monetize on some of the investments and use that money to get new talents on board, to enable existing talents, and shifting basically to more service-oriented skills, use case focus in the organization rather than getting stuck on, on technology alone. So it's more like moving from an activity technology base more to use case outcome base, the overall approach, and that has the impact on the organization how it's being designed.
Yeah, I think it's out of question that the capabilities and the competences of the teams have changed dramatically and will need to change further dramatically. The software focus, analytics focus, which we are embracing, DevOps and the agile mindset behind, they require a complete different mindset and set of people in the organizations as what we had in the 2G era. And it's becoming increasingly difficult because in a way the telcos, they have lost a little bit the mojo, right? We are not necessarily the first choice anymore of graduates from universities in the field of software development, etc. They are looking at joining the Googles and alike, right, or startup companies, etc. So how to remain competitive on the employment side to attract then the talents which we need. We spoke earlier about Open RAN. If we would at the end of the day believe in Open RAN, where there is not one single vendor which is giving you the whole thing end to end, you will need by default have software engineers, development engineers, analytical engineers to operate and administrate this whole stack. And the same when it comes to core and SDN and etc. Right? So indeed, the challenge here is to attract the right talents, to overhaul constantly also the existing competences we have. And that typically goes indeed along with transformation programs. If you just take technology in and you have no clue how to operate, it's it's not giving you any benefits, right? So start with the people first, then take the technology on board, which then makes best of use of those people you have in the organization. When it comes to, let's say, the platform business, marketplaces, etc., open architecture, again, totally different competences required as compared to the past, where you just went to one vendor and said you build your whole whatever CBS CRM stack, right? It's a complete different game now, and that game we have to play. Otherwise, we will be a dump pipe in future. Yeah, probably are already comparably.
I think that's something that it makes me excited to hear that, because I think the belief that it's easy to operate infrastructures like you both have is not accurate. I mean, you have complex infrastructures that are built up with different technologies from different partners, from different generations, and it's all still in the network today. And the people that it takes to have the knowledge and the skills, the patience and the creativity to keep running that infrastructure at the levels that it's running to serve the community is enormous. And so I think when you say you start with your people, I think that's a powerful statement, because those are the same people that have been solving these complex problems for many years. And as we keep introducing new technologies, it's the same people that continue to learn how to take that on and make it work well for your customers. So I think that's fantastic, and I do agree. It is, use that as your foundation, and we start seeing the university graduates coming along and start building services on top of these platforms. So we have a few minutes left. I do have one question. This is an open-ended question that you get to actually think about the future, and you get to predict what your future will be. And one of the things that I think is kind of neat about this is if you put your flag in the ground in say 2025, you state what 2025 will be, you naturally start actually operating towards that goal. And so my question to both of you are, can you share what your ideal future state for the network, the cloud, and edge for your organization would look like in 2025?
Maybe let me start. Axiata traditionally is relatively mobile heavy. We haven't invested much yet in fixed and home broadband infrastructure. That's definitely going to change because we obviously recognize that, let's say, next generation services will require homogeneous networks, right? At the end, consumers want to have perfect home broadband and mobile on the go, and convergence, even if it is painful to a certain extent and eventually ARPU dilutive, etc. But that is what consumers over time will go for and embrace, also in our markets. So investing into fixed will be one of the key investment verticals for Axiata going forward. Let's say 2025, there will be a slim 2G layer left. There will be no 3G in any of our markets. We are optimistic that by that time, 5G will be really the driver of the business. 4G will stay on for quite a while. And to support such an setup, yes, cloudification will be absolutely key. Software-based, the same, both on radio, on transport, on core, and that goes in a way from A to Z across all dimensions. We are very much investing into open architecture. Openness, I believe, is a very, very big enabler for the future revenue growth. B2B2X, marketplaces, that's where we are putting a lot of efforts, both from a technology standpoint as well as from a mindset and business development standpoint in. We are very much meant to invest into enterprise business, which has been probably a little bit of underinvested again in some of our markets, which were very consumer heavy, but obviously over time now advancing and evolving. And mentioning edge, as soon as 5G is picking up, yes, edge is coming to a much bigger role. Whereby, however, we believe that eMBB will be the absolutely dominant use case in our markets from a 5G standpoint. And video, which, let's say the conventional video as what we know today and what most of the traffic is carried for, they will not necessarily require an edge. But when it comes to a metaverse experience, which probably then the first movers will adopt by that time, whatever metaverse will be, then an edge is critical. And we are prepared for investing into it and to build. But in a nutshell, very much cloudified, very much software based, and looking at what is the most efficient access piece from a production cost standpoint to serve the ever evolving customer expectations.
Great, thank you.
So from my angle, I think our overarching target is that in 2025, our network helps to maintain the best customer experience for our customers in the Philippines. It took us 5 years to get there, and whatever we do, we have to continue to be there because it's a big competitive advantage. But in order to get there, I think what we have to confess and admit to ourselves is that the transformation is perpetual. There is no more ending. The speed of innovation has increased and it's stepping up. And if we cannot assume this is a 1 year thing and then it's over, no, you better get used to having that as a permanent part of your business. And as I said before, we started to move much more service. So that's also part of the vision I have, is that our people move more and more into the service focus, experience optimized, automated workflows. I see some DevOps capabilities even in the network operations area where we can very agile deliver new capabilities and react to whatever competition is doing, what customers are expecting. The technologies, as Thomas mentioned, I don't want to list again. I think it's very clear what the right focus will be. But at the end of the day, everything doesn't help if you do not continuously improve customer experience. That's for me the number one vision I have.
No, that's excellent. Well, look, I appreciate both of you taking the time to share what I thought were very thoughtful answers to questions that frankly could go a lot of different directions. I love the passion, and I'm looking forward to checking back in with you, not in 2025, but multiple times up to 2025, and making sure that you are getting adequate support from the rest of the industry on accomplishing your goals. So.